Hero Class Civil Warfare by Rogue Druid. Chapter 12 Grudging Sacrifice. Day 1, 19 hours 22 minutes, 7:22 p.m. local time. Deku, you piece of shit! The yell echoed down the gray stone corridor. The fluorescent lighting and exposed panels above them belying that they were in a service corridor. Hi, Kachan. You know, I was hoping Con Man's orders would work to keep you busy for a while longer. Izuku turned, eyes cold as he looked at Bakugo down the corridor. He reached up and adjusted his hat slightly. Behind him, the villains dragged the coffins down the doors, several of them shooting worried glances at their leader. With the tensing of his fists, the sound of crackling fireworks filled the room. Bakugo tensed and readied for the fight. I'm going to end this fucking exercise right here, right now, Bakugo growled, hand flashing out and sending a burst of light and sound echoing through the corridor. A flashbang, designed to daze and confuse. Bakugo was testing the waters. With a shrug and a spin, the suit jacket intercepted the explosion, muffling it but leaving the cloth jacket smoldering and in tatters. At the end of the corridor, Izuku tilted his head, eyes traveling from the cloth to Bakugo, before he gently tossed it and let it land at the base of the cement wall to the side. Izuku began to fold the sleeves of his white button-up shirt up, cuffing them above his elbows to reveal the scarred skin and tight muscle. His forearms were already crackling with faint lines of green and red as One for All pulsed through him. Really? You think that you can take me? Right here? Right now? Izuku mocked, before reaching out a hand to the wall and slamming his fist through a glass-covered red metal trigger. He yanked down, all but ripping it from the wall. The motion etched with a glimmer of green energy. Let's see it then. The ring of a fire alarm triggered, and with a hiss, the sprinklers lining the hall burst to life. With a growl, Bakugo realized what the play was. Mixing his sweat with the water would weaken his explosions. The near rain in the corridor would chill them both, lessening the sweat he could output regardless. That meant he only had 2 heavy blasts, the stored sweat in the gauntlets. He either had to lead with that or save them for a surprise down the fight. He chose to lead. He rushed forward, getting closer. In response, Izuku rushed back, his face and arms crackling with a faint aura of tightly regulated power. Water streamed off his stupid hat as they neared each other. The two met with roars of effort and a flash of power. Ida all but staggered down the last of the stairs, looking around. The fire alarm was going off for some reason, and he could barely hear over it. A battered Ojiro and a focused Tsunatori were trailing as he looked around. Reaching up to tap his comms. HQ, come in. This is Ida. HQ, come in. This is HQ. Ida, are you okay? I'm getting crazy signals from the security system of the building. I got those feeds you wanted. Is something on fire? The slightly nervous ramblings of Kodai came over the comms. I don't know, but listen. Get the others on watch moving and wake up someone to watch the monitors. They need to get here. Now. Kingpin is here. Ida spoke tersely, already running around and trying to listen for the faint sounds of explosions. Below him? We need backup now. On our way, Kodai confirmed, the sounds of her moving from the console coming through before she cut the communication. Ojiro, look for the lower floor team. I doubt Kirishima and Tetsu Tetsu went down easy. Tsunotori helped me find a way down. The two leaders lashed out, fists and weakened explosive blasts slamming against the walls as the two once friends, now enemies, fought. Splashes of water were kicked up with each step. The snap and hum of super-powered blows being exchanged filled the air with each dodge and parry. The clanging explosions and the pulse of green lights pushed each block. Connecting fists moved faster and faster and faster. All of these things marked the anthem of their fight. Midoriya ducked around a right, catching Katsuki's arm and twisting, slamming him face first into the wall. Midoriya ducked around a right, catching Katsuki's arm and twisting, slamming him face first into the wall. Katsuki swore and swung back out of the grip, arm scraping along the wall as he twisted and swung his left grenade gauntlet, aiming at Deku. With a shout, he set his stance to hold against the recoil and pulled the trigger. Die, shitty Deku. He glanced up and saw Midoriya lunge, not away, but towards Katsuki. Hat held in hand as he brought it down on the nozzle of the gauntlet. The explosion blew them both back. After a few seconds to regain his footing, Katsuki looked down. Where his gauntlet had once been now stood only cracked metal wreckage attached to the armored bracer which had twisted his wrist. He looked up, watching the quickly dissipating smoke around Midoriya as the green-haired kingpin stepped through the curtains of water provided by the sprinklers. The hat he held in his hand smoked, the feathers nothing but ragged tufts. Yet the hat itself was intact. It had taken his strongest explosion full force without tearing apart. I really do have to thank Hacker for this. She came up with material resistant enough to redirect your explosions. Deku gave a bloody grin and set his hat back on his head, water running down his face from his green hair, strands plastered to his face. There was a second of stillness, both of them tensing to fight before, with a flicker of green, Izuku got in close. The two once more traded blows back and forth. But with only one gauntlet left and soaked to the bone by the sprinklers, Katsuki was practically quirkless. A series of jabs to his arms and shoulders left him gasping. Midoriya ducked low, kicking out Katsuki's footing before shoulder-checking him to the ground. As Katsuki tried to reorient himself and get his breath back, he found himself pinned, the right half of his face submerged in the pooling water. Deku's knee was in the center of his lower back, and his gauntleted arm was painfully twisted up and back, leaving him panting and spitting water as he tried to catch his breath. You know, I find the irony here almost cathartic. The soft voice of Deku came to him. Not because you're the hero and I the villain, but because this exercise has proven something I've always believed. Katsuki twisted and struggled as he set off as large an explosion as he could. He rolled to the side and up into a crouch, arms coming up on reflex, up to block a flickering green knee that shoved him up to his feet. What do you fucking know? A snapped right hook slammed into Katsuki's cheek, sending him staggering across the hall before he came back. His fists swung in heavy haymakers as he tried to shut Deku up. I know that you are obsessed with being number one. I know you think that heroism is a competition, that being the best means something. Katsuki screamed and lashed out, making Deku stagger back, a bruise forming on one bloodied cheek. He spun around with the hit and came back to a slam of glowing foot into a hasty raised guard. He sent Katsuki staggering back once more. Being number one, it never mattered in the same way to me. I appreciate the title, the meaning behind the words. Katsuki raised his remaining arm cannon, trying to aim through the blood stinging his eyes, but Midoriya was already in close. He kicked the cannon out to the side as he choke-slammed the blonde into the wall. For the first time, they stood eye to eye, face to face since the start of the exercise. Blood-red eyes bored into glowing acid-green ones. Not Paragon and Kingpin, black and white. No, Deku and Kacchan stared into each other's eyes, both locked in a struggle. There are heroes and there are villains. That's the fight you should be worried about. Number one, it's a joke, a public opinion piece ran by gossip magazines that worry more about sales than merit. I'd rather be a symbol of peace, Deku said, voice soft, private. Before Katsuki could even consider a response, Deku reached out, yanking his still gauntleted arm cannon down the hallway back towards the museum building and pulled the trigger with a swift motion. Across the entrance to the tunnel, a wall of ice caught the shot, shattering because of the blast. Midoriya stepped back, and Katsuki swayed forwards, breathing deep and coughing from the choke slam. May looked over the AR monitors, cursing as she directed the acquisition squad through the tunnels to the drop-off for the coffin. Mezzo was with them moving the coffin, but Larceny and Conman had both stayed back to wait for Izuku. In the meantime, she looked at the rifle next to her, cursing the fact that Izuku had told her not to shoot anyone who wasn't on the target of opportunity list. Beyond that, Ojiro had finally gotten Kirishima out of the car he had been entombed in, and they were both helping to pull Tetsu out from the half-meter deep hole he caused in the pavement. She had sent a warning to Izuku about the backup team of heroes, but hadn't had a chance in hell to stop them. Not with Todoroki there. Regardless, all she could do now was grit her teeth and hope that Izuku could pull out a win. The fight so far had sounded and looked brutal over the security monitors. She could only imagine how the teachers were reacting. A green, lightning-laced Spartan kick sent Bakugo flying back down the hallway, only to be caught by the combined efforts of Shishida and Fukudashi, while beside them Shiozaki and Tsunatori readied to fight. Yet, the biggest threat to Izuku stood before the cluster of heroes. Todoroki stood next to Ida, both of them tense. Down the hall, Izuku chuckled before standing up straight. Gently, his hands reached up to touch his bleeding lip and poke at the bruise across his jaw. His eyes were focused on the heroes. Well, 6 on 1. 7 if Bakugo still counts, but considering how soaked he is, gonna say not. Fuck off, Deku. Bakugo choked out before falling into a coughing fit, holding his neck. And the bruised throat. Can't forget that. Izuku nodded amicably. Surrender now, Kingpin. You cannot escape. Ida thundered, the statement backed by a rumble of engines and a tensed stance. Beside him, Todoroki swirled with traces of fire as ice reached the ceiling, sealing off the sprinklers. Izuku chuckled but hid a wince. Bakugo hit hard, and he was now sporting a few aching ribs and jaw. Not to mention, his knuckles were bruised and swelling from the punches against the grenade gauntlets. The gloves had helped, but these weren't the special ones for Kachan. He eyed them, options from what he had ready rolling through his mind. He didn't know how many of his backups or prepared plans were even close to ready, and his earpiece was missing, lost in the fight, most likely. It was looking more and more like he was going to have to bluff or connive his way. "Excuse me, boss." A flash of blonde showed Monoma Nato, codename Larceny, stepping forwards, hand already resting on Izuku's shoulder. "Sorry about this, boss, but your taxi is waiting, and you are far too important to lose here." At that moment, green met gray. Izuku realized that Larceny had touched the side of his neck. "Wait, Lars!" With a glowing surge of green and silver lightning, Izuku was lifted and sent flying back through the tunnel to the entrance to the underground, only to be roughly caught by the slim form of Con Man. Izuku's eyes were panicked, green staring out with glowing fire. "See ya, boss. Stay safe, yeah?" Nato grinned back down the hall at Izuku, throwing his boss a wink before the door started to close. "Wait! Fuck! Nato!" echoed his voice as the doors slammed shut. Nato bit off a hiss, looking at his now broken left arm. It was quickly turning black and blue from the damage. He turned to look at the heroes, who were standing there in shock. Nato chuckled, though the pain made the sound sharp and shaky. "Well, I still have an arm, so let's see if I can copy my boss, yeah? 2 for 2. Todoroki was already widening his eyes as Nato drew his arm back, taking aim down the hallway at the heroes. A quick rush of ice was thrown up and the heroes stepped back and started to brace themselves, ice forming thick walls and rushing down the corridor towards him. "You know what our teachers say," Nato grinned, green light surging down his arm. "Go beyond, plus ultra." Nato swung in a full body motion forwards and roared. He unleashed a punch aimed not at, but above the heroes, at the ceiling and into the lobby of the skyscraper. He watched the water around him turn into mist in the shockwave's pressure, walls cracking from the edge of the force. The ceiling shattered under the force of the hit, caving out and away from the source of the pressure. Then the pain hit, and he blacked out for a few seconds, trying to cradle his broken arm as the pain consumed him. A beat, anywhere from a few seconds to half a minute. Nato blinked to clear the tears from his eyes, looking out and up at the ruins of the lobby. The angled, several-meter-thick ice wall that had been built to shield the heroes quickly began to have a hole melted through it. Above them, the concrete ceiling had been shattered and pushed back, the floor of the lobby bucking and bursting through the front door, the associated lobby wall, and a good portion of the neighboring second-story wall. Even through the night, Nato could see that the windows across the street had shattered from the force. He winced at the fact that his arms felt like they were on fire and staggered forwards, kicking a seat into place that had fallen from the front lobby, a couch now missing half its length. As it settled back onto its 2 left feet and the broken center resting on the shattered concrete, Nato breathed a deep sigh and the ice barrier cracked and shattered. In less than 10 seconds, he found himself facing the 7 heroes, newly ruffled from his grand hurrah. "Well, I surrender," Nato smiled, slightly manic, "though I can't quite raise my arms to gesture right now." Across from him, 7 pairs of eyes narrowed. "Damn, tough crowd." Izuku caught his breath as they finally reached far enough that heroes couldn't catch them. The tunnel network around the museum was filled in with resin bombs and rigged tunnels collapsed behind them, traps going live. The green-haired leader looked at the purple brainwasher across the pipe from him. Think I sold the performance? Yeah, very melodramatic. A villain sacrificing himself for the cause, the leader grieving the loss of a subordinate. Conban chuckled, tossing the white and black mask of the kingpin back across the tunnel. I think larceny is going to be right where we want him. I gave him the rundown, and he loved the plan. Good. Izuku pulled the mask on, voice suddenly coming off far more sinister through its distortion. I hate that we had to play this out, but it does mean we are one step closer. In fact, I would even say that we've now begun moving into the mid-game phase. Contact base. Get teams sorted. We're going for the rush. Three days before the exam, Musutafu Ward. Hitoshi and Midoriya sat at a counter. The coffee shop was open until midnight, and the hour was fast approaching. He and Midoriya had talked business as it was. So, the two were now simply enjoying the calm atmosphere, coffee and teacups littering the table as much as paper and pens did. Hitoshi sipped his tall, dark espresso, eyes soft from their usual mania, as he looked over a few notes he had made. Hitoshi considered what was happening, how close he had become to Midoriya's master plans, and felt a rush of familiar anxiety. The words slipped out. Why me? Midoriya blinked, eyes widening as he sucked down another mouthful of creamy frappe coffee. In what context? He tilted his head. The exercise, the huge game you're playing, the plans and routes we can take. Why are you telling them to me? Hitoshi emphasized, by tapping his finger on the notebook's title Stage Directions, in the center of the table. I'm not even in your class. Hell, we only started meeting up after the sports festival and your internship because we both suffer insomnia and prefer to be productive at ungodly hours of the night. Why make me your second, your field commander? There was a pause. Midoriya swallowing another sip of his drink and then leaned back, arms crossed as he stared at Hitoshi. Because I trust you. I trust you to know, better than anyone else I can bring in on this, how far is too far. Midoriya looked Hitoshi dead in the eye and said, with as much honesty, purpose, and pleading as he could, I trust that if I get too into the persona of a villain, you'll snap me out of it. Not just because your quirk can, but because I trust you will. I know that you dislike the idea of being a villain, that though you enjoy the irony of the exercise, you don't want to be a villain more than you already are accused of. So if I go too far, if I get lost in my own mind, I need someone to pull me back from the edge. There was a moment of silence, and Hitoshi was in awe. Me? But I don't have the best quirk or share classes with you. How can you trust me? All we do is come and sit and talk. We're friends, yeah, but... is what he wants to say. But the thought is cut off. A flash of memory from after the internship period. I never had many friends. Midoriya rubbing his neck and looking tired at 3 a.m. in an all-night diner. But I want to be one of yours. Izuku rubs his neck the same way now, and beneath the thin veneer of smiles and nervousness is true uncertainty. He's putting himself out there, trying to open up. Sure, Izuku, I'll keep you in check. That blinding smile he gets makes the anxiety he will no doubt suffer worth it. Hey guys, it's Tempe. Thank you for getting this far. I really enjoyed reading this fanfiction and I wanted to share it with you. So many people wrote their own takes on how the Civil War for AU would go down, but I enjoyed this one specifically. So if you enjoyed this as much as I did, please consider giving me a like, comment, or subscribing. If you have any suggestions that you would like me to read, please leave a comment or send it to the email in the description. That's everything, so I will see you in the next one. Bye!